this is something that everyone can actually do. That was one of the first things I did when I grabbed my blood vial and I took it outside and I got into the car. I actually didn't do the paper like Kathleen did, but I put the blood on my finger and I constantly try to turn the key over and over again. I flicked my hand in other ways. I try to smear it. No matter how many times I tried, there is no way that my fingers touch that dashboard. And the beautiful thing is, like I said, anyone can do it. Anyone can go to their car right now and try it. And I don't think it would matter what car you have. Cars are designed for you not to be touching that dashboard. So I just wanted to highlight that it's such a simple like test, but a very effective one. And it's not hard to see that no matter how you try to construct it, no matter how many times you try to reenactment, you're going to all get the same outcome, and that's the fact that the state's narrative that he turned the key and he touched it while he was turning the key it's impossible.
But didn't Mr. Kratz say that the stain that he left was exactly commensurate with how you have to move your hand to turn the key? I thought that's what he said.
Yeah,
Oh, God.
exactly.
Are you telling me he's lying?
I'd hate to break it to
Uh,
you, Big Jeff, but he's lying.
I think, yeah, thank you very much, Killy. Your blood experiments that you did are really, really illuminating. But it also goes to show how ridiculous the entire state scenario was. And that's why, in my opinion, it would have been really handy if Stephen Avery's defense team had a blood spatter expert. And what we can actually see here is that Kathleen Zellner is taking her time in order to try and reproduce what we see in the RAV4, right? And as you can elegantly see, it's impossible to reproduce what you see there. And isn't it interesting that as she was applying blood, just the natural action of you starting a car, touching the gear lever shift, touching the steering wheel, that's exactly where we don't find the blood in the Toyota RAV4. However, it looks awfully suspicious like Stephen's Pontiac Grand Am, right? The distribution of the blood in the Pontiac Grand Am is exactly what you would expect to see for someone who's actively bleeding. Blood on the gear shift, blood on the central console. You have a look at the Toyota RAV4. You don't find that. And in my opinion, that's actually quite telling.
About the Grand Dam, so let's address that because I see a lot of it's not conflict, but just a lot of you know, different angles on here. When we see it on the gear shift, what is the actual narrative to where the blood came from in the Grand Dam? Was it when he first cut open his finger and then drove it around? Or are we going through the fact that he says that when Stephen says that when he reopened his cut on the 3rd, he went into the Grand Dam to grab his phone charger and he was dripping and stuff. The reason why I asked that is because I had the conflicts, again, not the right word, but the arguments that I see from both sides is the guilters have said, you guys are all hypocrites. You sit there and say that, you know, um, there should be blood on the gear shift and there should be the blood on the steering wheel, but the state in one of their 7 bloody changing stories that they gave this blood pattern, Stephen didn't drive the car, so you wouldn't expect it on there. Yet we have the Grand Dam, which has got blood on the gear shift, but Stephen never says that he bled in on the gear shift because he was driving it. It was stationary, and he grabbed the phone charger out and smeared as he was doing it. So I just thought we should maybe address that bit because, again, there's blood on the gear shift, but is that from the first time he cut his finger open and he was driving around, or is it from it being stationary and it's a contact smear from where he was getting his phone charger out. Therefore, the pattern again is different again because it's not matching all the narratives that everyone keeps throwing in there, that where the blood come from, where it should be, where it shouldn't be.
Well, I mean, we know that he recut open his hand or his finger on November the 3rd, right? Because he said that he was over at his sister's trailer and moved something and he recut it open again. And Stephen stated that he did go in his Pontiac Grand Am. So, how do you explain the blood on the gear shift lever? He simply could have leant into the car. And you know how you go into your vehicle and you touch something to get some balance, especially if you're reaching out to grab the charger, depending on where the phone charger was. If he had rested his hand on the gear lever shift, then you would have seen blood being dripped. And you're right, it's like a contact stain. If you're going to drive a vehicle like the Toyota RAV4, because remember what the state said was that Stephen and Brendan had backed up Teresa's Toyota RAV4 in the garage, right? Which implies that they drove the vehicle. The fact that the vehicle was present in the pit area meant that either Stephen or Brendan had to have driven that vehicle to that location. If you're driving the vehicle, absolutely everyone knows you're going to touch the handbrake, you're going to touch the gear lever shift, you're definitely going to touch the steering wheel. You don't find any of his blood on those locations. This is important, guys, because now this forced Kratz to change the narrative. He knew that it didn't fit the narrative of someone bleeding and driving the vehicle. So Ken Kratz changed the narrative to say, oh, well, maybe Stephen bled after he dropped off the car at the pit. So you know that he's now paying attention to what Kathleen Zellner is doing and demonstrating because it doesn't fit the narrative. So now Stephen has cut his finger open or reopen again, not while driving the RAV4, not while attacking Teresa Teresa, but after he parked the vehicle at the pit because he's got no answer.
Here's the thing, and I talked about a lot of my interest in this case, both cases, is the mechanically how did they put it together, and say mechanically you think about working on a car, but I'm talking about how they piece these narratives together, and this whole deal about the RAV and the blood. I think about cutting myself working on cars in the past and being inside and being under the hood and not knowing that I'm bleeding, number one. Don't have any photos of that, but I think about the key and it having that fabric fob, no blood on it that we are aware of. I'm not sure that Sherry ever tested the fob. I don't think, or the cloth pot or whatever that material is. That's number one. Number two, and you guys have covered it really well, I won't rehash it. Where should the blood have been dripping from that finger, that reopened cut on Stephen's finger? I don't know. To me, though, it's not in places that I would suspect it should have been. That's just me, just looking, again, mechanically. The reasonable man, as Big Jeff says, or the reasonable woman, where's this stuff going to fall at? As you're moving around, it's dripping. Where the fuck's it going to fall? The last thing I'll say, the Grand Am, a lot of good questions there and comments, but I think that, if you look inside of it, the stains are really a lot different than they are inside the RAV. They really are. And I'm not saying that they necessarily wouldn't be, because he was in that car clearly many times from the time he sliced it open and then reopened it again. So that's not shocking to me. But where these stains are is a little. It to me it tells a truer picture versus the RAV4. This is strictly, again, putting the story together. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you, Jack. It kind of leads into the comment I wanted to make. Like, they just demonstrated that blood would have ended up on the shift column, on the shift there, the shifter. And so what are we to believe? There's no blood there. Did Stephen wipe that down? Brendan and Stephen wiped that down, but then forgot to get the part by the ignition?